Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. It's great to see you here again. And I have a very exciting guest for you this evening, Ian Hawkins. Welcome, Ian.
Hello, Jane. Lovely to be here.
Great to have you here, Ian. So, Ian is a speaker, a master storyteller, and a writer who makes change happen. So, this podcast episode is going to be all about change and the stories that we tell ourselves, and the stories that businesses tell, and the role that storytelling plays in terms of actually making change happen. So before we get into it, Ian, would you like to just introduce yourself and tell us where you got this passion for storytelling and change from?
Thank you very much, Jane. I think having gone through so much change in my own life, that's kind of where it came from. And I'm a little bit of an introvert, so I'm very interested in how I managed to go through change. When I was small, I was born with a heart condition, and I spent a lot of time in hospital. And when I came out, I sort of made a pact with myself. I said, that is it. I will never, ever be bored again. And I think that what happened is I've gone through life trying to do some very difficult things, trying to make a living doing some quite difficult things, like working in telly, working in radio, working as a writer. And it means that I've had to be flexible. I've had to go through change. I've had to embrace change. And
Mm.
I've really looked back into myself and gone, what is it that makes you quite good at adapting to change
Yeah.
and coming up with answers? And very luckily for me, Jane, it all comes down to the stories we tell ourselves, which is what I do, what I've always done for a living. One way or another, it's always been about telling stories.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And so is storytelling, is it a resilience method effectively?
I think so. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said something like along the lines of, "Oh, well, you can't change the past." And he looked at me and said, "Ian, you're an editor, or you used to be an editor of a magazine. You're an editor of film. You edit sound. You change the past all the time." And it sort of hit me. I went, "Yes. How could I be so?" This wasn't a long time ago. This was like 2 weeks ago. So, you know, I, change is one of those things, and storytelling, they are absolutely interconnected. And it is when you are, I think it's when you are trapped in a trauma, whatever that might be, that's when it's really hard to break out of. And it's when you can put the trauma in the past and move on from it, that's when you're able to have a meaningful resolution. We always talk about closure. I don't think
Mm.
it's necessarily about closure, because closure says you come to the end. What
Yeah.
it actually means is you've got whatever it is, whatever that trauma is, you've put it in the past and you've moved on from it, and you can draw lessons from it and you can benefit from it
Yeah.
without having it, controlling you.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so interesting. So, in terms of using it as a personal tool,
Mhm.
storytelling helps us bring about positive change and growth in our lives. Is that what you're saying?
That's absolutely what I'm saying. And I believe in storytelling. I also believe in the power of mistakes, Jane. Innovation is about mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, when people say failure is not an option, what they actually mean is innovation is not an option. They mean doing better is not an option. And failure and mistakes, I entirely embrace, because I've made so many of them myself. And
Oh,
I,
sure.
but the thing is, as my old man used to say, if you've made a mistake, you've paid the price. So you might as well take the lesson. And
I love that. He sounds like he had a few interesting things to say.
yeah, I sometimes phone him up, and I like to say I'm trying to get a good bit of advice from my dad, and my mum will go, "Oh yeah, a stopped clock." Sometimes it's brilliant, sometimes it's rubbish, but when he's good, he's good. Yeah, so that's one of them. Um,
Yeah.
but I think mistakes are where you do all your learning. And if you ask anybody who anybody out there who says, "Oh, I don't make a mistake," or "Failure is not an option," you go, "I bet you know nothing. I bet you've struggled to hold a conversation or have empathy or anything." I mean, and mistakes teach us empathy apart from anything else.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, and I think people that have strived and struggled and they failed, those are my favorite kind of people. because at least they tried. There are many people who they just live very small, safe lives and they don't take risks.
Mm,
Those are certainly not my kind of people. I like people who reach for the stars because I'm one of those people. And of course, what that means is that you fall flat on your face quite a lot when you do that.
yeah.
But but as you said, if you are the kind of person that reaches for the stars, you fall flat on your face, and then you take it personally and tell yourself a disempowering story, then that's pretty awful really, isn't it? But yeah,
It
you've gotta get that right, haven't you? That piece of
it
how
can
you
be.
frame what you do.
Yeah, I always call stories are the software that your brain runs on.
Mm.
Okay, because people that have made mistakes, they have a little glint in the eye. That you know that they'll bounce back. They're quite fun, sparky people. So I don't know if you've ever had the situation, Jane, where you believe one thing and somebody else believes another,
Mm.
and you think you've got a killer fact that will
Mhm.
change their mind, and you bring
Yeah.
out your killer fact, and it doesn't change their mind. And
Oh,
you go,
yeah.
yeah, happens all the time. And this because the truth is nobody changes their mind based on data or on a data point. And we don't. We make all of our decisions emotionally,
Yes,
and then we find the evidence to back it up,
definitely.
right? And emotions are not they're not vulnerable to facts. They are incredibly vulnerable to stories. We all believe the stories that we put in. And so if you want to change somebody's mind, whether that's somebody else's mind, if you want to change your own mind, you have to understand how stories work, and you have to work on that story and understand where you are in that story in order
Yeah.
to make change happen.
Yes, very interesting because stories are hardwired
Hmm.
into our psyche, aren't they? I mean, we grew up with stories. Stories have been around forever, ever since the Neanderthals probably, cavemen times and so on. They used to have these paintings, didn't they, in the caves that showed that they had stories. Obviously, the
Yeah.
Greek myths when nobody knew anything about the world, so they made up stories to make sense of the world and so on. And it's all very, very interesting, but it just goes to show that stories they have this power to tap into emotion. So I think what you said about people don't change their mind through logic is so true
Hmm.
because once we actually connect with emotion, then that's when it all happens, isn't it?
Exactly, exactly. And here's what I worry about, Jane. I worry that I say storytelling, and people out there in the business community go, "Oh God, this is just another one of these people that sits around on a beanbag weaving rainbows." And and I have to remind them that a story is not just stuff that happens.
Mm.
A story isn't just this happened, then that happened, then that happened, then
Yeah,
that happened. There's
yeah,
a story has an arc to it. There's elements all the way
yeah,
through, and you can tell where somebody is in their story depending on the things that they say.
yep.
Right. So at the heart of every story, right in the middle, just
Mm.
think of your favorite book or your favorite film. If you go to the middle minute, if you open it right in the middle of that book, go to the middle minute of that film, you will find the main character making a decision. And it happens in every single story in the world. It is the
Wow.
main character making a decision, and a decision is exactly what you have to work towards into the middle of a story. So if you take Nike, for example, Nike,
Mm.
just do it. That's a brilliant slogan. It's a story. It's saying to the customer, you have this decision right in front of you. Just do it. Just make that decision. Right? You want to get fit? Just do it. Go for a run? Just do it. That's why it's a brilliant,
Take a risk, just do it.
yeah, just do it. That's what, and it's a call to action.
Yep.
Yeah. I want a new pair of trainers. Just do it. You go, fantastic. Yeah, I will buy your £150 trainers, Nike. So if you remember that as every single story is about the decision that somebody makes, then that tells you that a decision is where you find your character,
Uh-huh.
and a plot and a character are exactly the same thing, right? One of the things that I say to people when they're putting together their pitch deck is I say, how much time have you spent on the projected figures for your business? And they go, oh, yeah, I've really worked it out, blah, blah, blah. I go, great. Projected figures, you and I know, Jane, total fiction. If you spend 3 weeks on it or 3 seconds, there's still absolute fiction. The thing that tells the investor whether or not they should be investing in you is the about you page, because your character and the decisions you make and your life story and what you will do under difficult circumstances, that is a far better indicator of success than some imaginary figures that you plucked out of thin air.
Totally.
Because, oh yeah, my company's set to grow by 500% in the next 6 months. Well, not if COVID comes along, it isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. People buy people, don't they? And people want to know what's under the bonnet of that
Exactly.
person.
I went to see, I went to one of these events, which is networking, where you're trying to, all these people trying to get investors, and 6 women stood up and pitched their business, and only one of them said anything about herself. She moved to the UK. She was an immigrant. She found it really hard to get a bank account, a dentist, a doctor, and a flat. And she went, what we need is a concierge service. So I set up a company as a concierge service for people emigrating to the UK. Totally remember that. Don't think it was the best idea. Don't think it was the brightest idea. But it's the only one I remember. The other 5, I'm sure they're great, but I can't remember them.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Well, that's right. And that is the power of storytelling, isn't it? And it's people are always interested in how people got to where they got to get to, I think. Does that make sense? How people got there.
Yeah.
Because everybody does have a story, and it's the one thing that is unique about them, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we all live on top of a pyramid that is all decisions all the way down.
Mm.
You know, we all have bumps and bends in the road and unexpected things happen to us. But basically, wherever you are at is kind of your own responsibility.
Mm.
Otherwise, you're just completely at the whim of the vicissitudes of life. And I know that there are structural problems that stop people from achieving their full potential. But basically, it does come down to that. If you're happy and interesting and fun as a person, it's because of decisions you've made.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I just wanted to go back to this tagline that you mentioned, the Nike one, "Just do
Mhm.
it," because that's a very, very smart tagline. It's what I interviewed a guy called Bill Schley, he wrote a book called The Microscript Rules, which is a
Mhm.
very, very interesting book. He was a copywriter for the Ted Bates agency in New York, so he's got a few stories. So that's a microscript, that little tagline. And some other of my favorites, I was just thinking of them as you mentioned that, are, of course, Coca-Cola, Open Happiness, and Skittles, Taste the Rainbow.
Do you know what though? I'm going to push back, Jane, because nobody wants to hear us agree with each other.
Oh,
One of the things I love doing is I love to host a pub quiz. It's one of
oh,
my
yeah.
sort of little side hustles, and
Okay.
I am, humble brag here, I'm the resident quiz host at the Ivy Club in Covent Garden.
What? I love that place.
Right.
You're kidding.
I,
Can
I
can
have
can
done.
I go there next
Yeah,
time you're there,
come.
will you? As
Yeah,
your
come on.
guest?
I'll let you know. Yeah, of course you can.
Okay.
I do. I have a. I've done loads of rounds, but one of my favorite rounds is saying the slogan, and you have to say the company. Okay.
Ah,
So taste the rainbow. Everybody gets it. Skittles. Just do it. Everybody gets it. Nike. Open happiness. I'm lucky if one team gets that right.
oh, really?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Open happiness. And you can see people going, no idea, no idea. And you think, God, how much money has Coca-Cola spent on that slogan, on that catchphrase?
Huh.
And it's the biggest brand in the world, Coca-Cola. And
Yep.
it leaves your standard pub quiz audience absolutely scratching their heads.
Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? Well, I mean, because I suppose Coca-Cola doesn't always use that. It's not, it's not really consistent across all of the advertising. It's one of its most famous slogans, but actually there are many more as well.
I reckon if I said the holidays are coming, 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 I bet most people would get that. Coca-Cola.
Oh,
Gosh. I'll have
yeah.
to try it. I have to try it. It's going to be an
Yeah,
experiment,
yeah.
Jane.
Well, God, I can't believe that you're quiz host at the Ivy Club, though. I mean, that is you know, I'm sorry, but I'm absolutely floored. I'm gonna come there and I'm gonna sip my cocktail and participate if that's okay.
Come on the
My
Smart Connect.
incredibly expensive, you know, £25 margarita or something, and
Come
yeah.
on the Smart Connector, they said. It'll be really good. You'll be able to talk business. And now it's just been totally derailed. Let's all go for cocktails and do pub quizzes
Yeah,
in
yeah.
at the
Oh
Ivy.
gosh. Yeah, isn't that funny? Okay, so storytelling,
Mm,
personally. So let's talk about stories that you tell other people, because obviously we can tell ourselves stories and make ourselves feel better and happier and reframe mistakes and become more resilient and all of that kind of thing, which is
mm.
all a wonderful thing. So telling stories to other people. Um, so how does that work? Is it a good thing to tell stories? Are we telling porcupines when we tell stories to other people, or are we yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's what people often worry about is, is it a story? Is it spin? Is it how realistic is it? And it comes back to this idea, doesn't it, that at the heart of every story is a decision, and the decision says something about your character. So ultimately you will be found out. Your decision has to be a genuine, authentic decision based on your genuine, authentic values. That's why people talk about businesses having values. It's because you can predict what they will do.
Mm,
Okay. I used to live next to a place which it sold tires for cars. Okay.
yeah.
And they had a big slogan outside which said, why spend more? And every time I walked past it, I'd come up with another really good reason to spend more money on a set of tires for my car. It's because I've got my family in the back. It's because it's snowing today. Why spend more? It's because I don't want to die in a horrible car crash. You go, and there are some things, like Ryanair, which promises you it's going to be the cheapest way of getting from one city to another. Okay, great. So as you're sitting there going, my knees are up around my ears, and I had to pay an extra £25 to put my bag in the hold. You go, yeah, that's because it's the cheapest. That's totally on brand. As you get off Ryanair and you unfold yourself from Ryanair, you go, well, they promised to be the cheapest, and they are, because it was a horrible experience.
Yeah, absolutely. No frills, never again.
Yeah. Whereas if you go to Fortnum and Mason and they say, here's a widget. Here's a widget from Fortnum and Mason, and they go, this is the cheapest you'll find anywhere. You go, but this is Fortnum and Mason. I'm not cash
I'm not here for
sensitive.
cheap.
I'm
I'm
not
here
here for
for
cheap.
special.
Yeah, exactly. So that's so in the so you have these so your values and the decisions you make have to be absolutely authentic, and that will shape your brand. It will shape the story you tell. It will shape your marketing messages, all that kind of thing, and it ultimately will shape the future of your company.
Mm. Okay. But I mean, in terms of, our interpersonal relationships, I
Mm,
mean, the reason why I ask this is because I am, well, let's just say a kind of natural storyteller, and my children always accuse me of exaggerating because, I like to be entertaining, I like to be fun.
mm,
So I really strive to be the most, interesting guest at the dinner party, if you like. I always, come up with these stories, and I try really, really hard to make them as interesting as and entertaining as possible, so that
mhm.
because I like to please, and I like to entertain. And then so people can always be guaranteed a good time when I'm with them, if I'm making an effort, obviously. But sometimes, I must admit, sometimes I find myself embellishing a
Mm.
little bit, just exaggerating just to really kind of, just be more entertaining, really, and my children have cottoned on to this, and they know that I do it. But a lot of people don't really, and they just think, "Oh my god, Jane's had such an interesting life," and all of those, those stories, that was incredible. And look, I would say like 90% of it is true.
Mm.
Probably 10% is kind of pushing it, to the, let's just say, the more entertaining extreme.
Jane, do your children want to have a boring mother? No, of course they don't. If you go to your bookshelf and take down a copy of a book called Danny Champion of the World by Roald Dahl, probably
Oh, yeah.
one of the finest books written in the English language, and you go to the back page, and on the back page it says, no child deserves a parent who is dull. Every child deserves a parent who is sparky.
Oh, good.
So I, I'm not a parent, but Jane, you absolutely have my blessing to make up all the crazy stuff you ever want to
Thank
with your
you.
kids.
Oh, that's a relief, that's a relief. I 'cause I was feeling like my conscience was pricking me, so now
It's
I'm off the hook, right?
How old are they? How old are your children?
28, 25, and 21.
Right. Well, it's not you, it's them.
Yes, I know, I know, I know.
But
They've just kind of cottoned on. I think they find it kind of quite amusing now, but they do say, "It didn't really happen like that. Oh, come on," and all this kind of thing, but
but this is the dinner table. It's not a court of law, and that's
no,
the thing.
good.
When you get people into a court of law, and you get people to say what their narrative is, and again, my friend who when I said to my friend, "You can't change the past," we all change the past because we all rewrite the stuff in here.
Mm,
If something happens, it doesn't matter how spectacular or interesting or dramatic it was, and you sit there with two other people, and then
mm,
you all write down an account of what happened. There will be three different accounts that contradict each other.
yep.
You know, so it's fine. That's why data doesn't change your mind. The story that you tell yourself changes your mind.
Yeah, yeah. And I also think that we humans tell ourselves stories because, we don't like being bored.
Mm,
And I think storytelling, whether we're telling ourselves a story or whether we're telling other people a story, it's a way of keeping ourselves entertained, isn't it,
yeah,
really? Because if you think
absolutely.
about it, if you took away the power of stories, our life would be really, really dull, wouldn't it?
Yeah. When you write up your diary at the end of the day, do you go, "Oh, I sat around, had a cup of tea, and watch telly"? No, you don't. You talk about went on the Smart Connect podcast. That's what you. That's what I'm writing tonight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. And but let's bring it back to understanding what a story is. So a story is a
Mm.
beginning. It's a crisis,
Yeah.
which leads to a decision. You make a decision about that crisis, and
Mm.
then you resolve that crisis at the end.
Yep.
So Star Wars, uh, classic example. The rebels are in a small spaceship, and then the Imperial starship is a great big spaceship chasing after it. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the opening scene. Closing scene: Death Star blows up. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's other stuff that goes on, but actually, you might as well just cut to the credits. In the middle, a decision is made that we're going to attack this spaceship, and that is the whole story. I When I was in hospital, I was in hospital a lot when I was a kid, and everyone told me I had a great story because I had thoracotomy, I had open heart surgery, and I had it at a time which was incredibly risky. So people had what I was born with. The mortality rate was something like 90%. Now,
Yeah, yeah.
now it's 10%. Okay, so
Oh,
that's
wow.
how fast medical science moves. Okay, but it's an incredibly risky operation. And when I
Mm.
got out and I survived it, and I went back to school, having missed a year and a half of school,
Yeah.
people say, "Oh, you've got a great story," and I didn't. I didn't have a great story. Other people had had a great story because they'd gone through the trauma, but they'd made the decisions. I'd made no decisions at all. I had ended up being told, "This is the end for you. You're better." And of course, I'm not better. I had, you know, emotional trauma, physical trauma, all kinds of other things going on.
Yep.
And it wasn't until I was a lot older that I had an opportunity to go, well, actually, I've not really made any decisions.
Mm.
I'm going to start making decisions. And when I started doing that, I basically went from the end of my story.
Yeah.
I flipped the book right back to the beginning. I
Mm.
said, right, the story starts now, and
Yeah.
I have decisions and opportunities in front of me.
Yeah, yeah. So
Does that make
interesting.
sense?
It does. Yeah, that's really, really interesting.
Mm,
Very, very interesting. And I was also just thinking when you said that, don't let other people tell your story for you, right?
hmm 100%.
Yeah, and I think particularly I mean, I've been through some health traumas as well because
Mm,
I had cancer many years ago, about 12 years ago,
mm,
and, they're very, very quick to discharge me. Obviously, they're like, "Well, you finished treatment," and I was like, "Well, don't I come back for any checks or scans or" "No, no, 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 you're discharged now." And that I think it's very easy to think, well, okay, that means that's the end of it now. You're fine.
Mm.
Because that is really the tone that you're told, "No, that's the end of it. It's all done." And somehow, you are a completely different person after that experience than you were beforehand. And it actually takes years to figure out who that new person is. And that's why I think it's important, particularly if you've been through something really big in your life, to actually define that person and that story for yourself rather
Yeah.
than have other people put a label on you or, you know, as I said, tell that story on your behalf, whoever it is, whether it's a professional or a member of your family or whatever. Never let anybody else tell your story for you.
Yeah. And I don't know if your experience is similar to mine, um, but I hear this a lot with people who've had cancer, is they
Mm.
say, I hate it when people say we're fighting cancer, because we're not. We're lying there and letting the doctors do their job. And you're having so many decisions taken away from you. Whatever
Yeah,
your plans were, those have all been put on hold because you've got cancer. And if
yeah.
they say, we'll see you at 10 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, you're not going to go, I was going to go for a swim. You're going to go, okay, I'll see you at 10 o'clock on Tuesday morning. And you don't get to decide what your side effects are of the treatment. And you don't get to decide when you're discharged. And
Mm,
all you're left with is sitting there, facing down your mortality, going, I don't know how much time I've got left. I don't know whether I've got much time left or loads of time left. And I don't know what my attitude towards it should be. And then
mm.
you're at some point, hopefully told, we're going to discharge you. And then you are suddenly handed a sort of, well, this whole chapter of your life has just gone on without you, and you're
Yeah.
left going, oh, that all changed me. I had nothing to do with it.
Well, I mean, that's very, very insightful because it
Hmm.
absolutely is like that. And when I look back on that particular time, the one thing I had to do was just surrender to the process.
Yeah.
And in a way, I think that was a very humbling thing because before that, well, it never even thought, it never even occurred to me, even though it should have occurred to me because lots of people in my family did die young and they also had cancer. So,
Mm.
but I don't know why I would think that it would never happen to me, but I think we don't think these things. And then when it does happen to you and when you are going through it, you realize, I'm quite a willful person in a way. I've
Mm.
always wanted to be in the driving seat of my own choices, and I don't really like being told what to do by anybody else. I'm just that type of person. I like to make up my own mind about things, and I'm quite decisive. And I just had to be a really different person,
Mm.
and I had to be somebody who was just a receiver. I was just, had to let the process happen. And that was a very interesting experience, and I think it taught me a lot because most of the time, we're out there, we're fighting, we're trying to kind of make this happen, make that happen, and all the rest of it. And
Mm.
when it's something as big and as life-changing as that happens to you, and I'm sure this will resonate to you for you, because I know we're gonna talk about your COVID experience in a
Mm.
minute as well, and you do have to just surrender, then it is very interesting, and I think it changes you forever
Yeah.
in a good
I mean,
way.
well, that's your choice for it to change you in a good way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely.
So that's definitely saying, right, we've flipped a page. We're on the next chapter. We're
Yeah.
going to start making decisions again. I was a very heavy drinker for a good number of years,
Mm.
and it sort of annoys me when people say, "Oh, you've battled alcoholism." I said, "Well, I haven't battled it because it won." You know? I don't drink now because if I did, yeah, I don't like to think. Well, I wouldn't have this, flat for one. Uh, so, but it was just a fight I chose not to be in anymore.
Yep.
And I sincerely believe that the reason for being such a big drinker is because alcohol is a brilliant drug if you want to avoid stuff, because it just narrows your focus, narrow, until you are just interested, like all addictions really, you're just interested in the next drink or the next whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you don't have to deal with anything else. And as soon as I sort of went, actually, I don't want to be like this anymore, and I don't want to be drunk all the time, that was actually it's a pretty small, a small decision that most people don't even realize they're making, which is that I'm not going to have a drink today. And for me, for the first little while, that was a really big decision, but it totally reshaped everything I was doing.
Yeah. That's very, very interesting. And well, I mean, again, there's a lot of alcoholism in my family. My brother died of alcoholism. I mean, there's a lot. My ex-partner was a very serious alcoholic and drug addict a long time before I met him. So, I've been around that all my life. And I think in a way, it's a sort of adaptive response, isn't it, to life being overwhelming, put it that way. And life becomes overwhelming in part because we don't know how to deal with these stories. We don't know how to reframe them. We don't know how to deal with change. We don't have the support maybe to actually live life in a healthier, happier way. So I totally understand why, having been through all of that, and also your COVID journey, which we were just talking about beforehand, you were hospitalized for that, weren't you? So that is also
Yeah.
a very, very powerful and life-changing thing, isn't it? Really, what you went through there. Would you like to just talk about that for a moment?
Sure thing. So I was running half marathons for my patients association, born with heart disease, running
Yeah.
half marathons. Don't tell my consultant, but yeah, I did used to run. I'd be running along and I'd go past the British Heart Foundation and I'd see people I knew cheering people on. I'd be like, don't look at me. Don't look at me. Because I've worked out how much money I've raised and how much it would cost to put me in an ambulance. And it's not the same. If I've overdone it, I've cost the money. I've cost the charity more than I've raised.
Oh.
So I was quite a fit, healthy person doing this, and I was
Mm.
working, a very demanding 40-hour week as a news editor, and became aware of this news story coming out about this this pulmonary infection that was going around in the Far East and was coming over to Europe, and thinking we should probably do something about this. And then on Monday morning, went into the office, which had people coming from all over the world coming and going. So it's kind of ground zero for COVID. If it's going to be anywhere, it's
Yeah.
going to be there first. Started to feel unwell during a meeting. And my sort of initial delight that I could get out of this boring meeting by going home sick suddenly turned into, actually, I really don't feel well. I don't think I'm going to go home. I think I'm going to go to A&E. And
Wow.
then going to A&E and them doing a load of blood tests and going, well, you haven't had a heart attack, but there's quite a lot of damage to your heart.
Wow.
And your lungs aren't what they could be, and your blood oxygen's really low, and we're going to keep you in. And I'd gone from being someone that could run a half marathon with some facility, under 2 hours, humble brag, to going up to the end of the ward, getting myself a cup of tea, coming back, putting the tea on the side of the bed, and then dropping into like a deep, deep sleep, and then waking up hours later, the tea was stone cold.
Wow.
And thinking, oh, this isn't good. But for all that negativity about it, and I don't recommend a stay in hospital to anybody,
No.
it did have echoes of where I'd been before. I'd spent a lot of time in hospital as a child, and now here I was as an adult.
Yeah.
And as a child, I didn't have any autonomy or any decisions that I could make. And here I was, heart not working, and I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't know it's COVID, and I assumed that my heart had gone, that a valve had broken, or it might be heart failure or something like that. And I said, right, if you can't work your demanding 40-hour a week job, if you can work 8 hours a week, you can't charge for your time anymore. You have to charge for value, the value you bring. You have to charge for your expertise. What are you an expert in? What value do you bring? And an idea popped into my head. I got my computer out. I built a website at 3 o'clock in the morning using hospital Wi-Fi, and I started a business.
Amazing.
Because I knew that there's no way on earth anyone was going to employ me in that condition. And the only person that's going to employ me and pay my mortgage was going to be me. So
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I created CVTV, which records does video interviews for people looking for jobs or thought
Mm.
leadership or are pitching for business. So it's like a 6-minute video. I interview you as a business journalist. You tell me about yourself. You tell me about your values. You tell me about your experience. You tell me about what you want to do in the future. And that becomes a very clear about you package that people can send to potential employer, potential investor, whoever.
Amazing. That is so good. And in a way, sometimes back against the wall
Mm,
moments are they are the catalyst that we need for brilliance in a way. And innovation, you were talking about innovation, is innovation is very linked to change, growth, all the rest of it. And
mm.
do you think it was that moment where you were like, look, I can't do anything here. I can't do anything except fall back on my ingenuity and my ideas and the essence of me.
Yeah, it all came down to that thing. Here is a crisis. You want to resolve this crisis. What is
Mm,
the decision in the middle that is authentic and real,
mm,
that is genuinely from me, that I can do? So
yeah,
now I talked to my accountant the other day, and my accountant said, "I love what you do because you do keynote speeches at conferences, you do moderating at conferences, you host quizzes, you run CVTV," and he said, "It on paper it looks like you're doing a million different things, but it's the same skill set,
yeah,
just capturing the
distributed.
light in slightly different ways."
Yeah, distributed across different channels, basically.
Yeah, and they're all different enough to keep me interested. And so, as the promise I made to 8-year-old me, I'd never be bored. Well, he's very pleased because I'm never bored. Uh,
Oh, that's
but
fantastic.
I'm also doing something where I'm doing something which allows me to play at the top of my talent in all
Yeah,
kinds of different ways, and it's a nice place to be.
amazing, amazing. That's so good. Yeah, so Ian, you've written some books, haven't you? And you've actually got some of them there, you
I've
said.
got
So would you
books.
like to pick them up and show everybody?
I'm going to
Yeah.
do two things here. Okay, so
Yep.
the first book is called "Storytelling is Your Superpower,"
Mm.
which is available exclusively through LinkedIn. You have to send me a message on LinkedIn if you want to get a copy.
Right.
Do you know why this is a good book? Because it's short. It's it's really short. It's about 24 pages, and
Amazing.
so if you don't like it, you haven't wasted a lot of time reading it.
Okay. Well,
my,
that's great. Well, what a plug.
my, my mate Shah Wasman said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Keynote speaking." She said, "Great. What's your book?" I said, "I don't have a book." She said, "Write one." I said, "You're not getting 35,000 words out of me." She said, "Oh, it doesn't have to be that long." I went, "Does it not now?" Right, short. This is basically takes you through what a story is from beginning to end. It's got a couple of games you can play, whether you play it with your children, whether you play it with your head of finance. It's really fun, and it just takes you through the whole idea of storytelling.
Amazing.
The other thing I would say is, and you'll never hear an author say this,
Mhm.
so press record play now. You'll never hear an author say this. Do not buy this book, right? It's my book, Insider Secrets of Public Speaking.
Ooh,
I have on my desktop now there the rewrite. I'm rewriting it and republishing it in 2024. We're
amazing.
changing the title, Insider Secrets of Professional Speakers. So
Aha.
because an agent once said, "Don't say public speaking, Ian. Sounds like you're doing it for free." Okay. Insider Secrets of Professional Speakers. So it's
Mm.
everything I've picked up from sitting in the wings watching people like Sarah Millican, Michael McIntyre, Jimmy Carr, William Hague, David Blunkett, Eliza Manning and Buller, all these fantastic speakers that I've
Mm.
worked with. I've sat there with a notepad and gone, what have they got in common? What does Alistair Campbell have in common with Sarah Millican? I asked myself.
Mm. How interesting. I would love a copy of that when it comes out.
When it comes out. So that's it, it'll the best thing to do is probably to follow me on LinkedIn, and
Yeah.
then you'll discover just how much of a self-publicist I can be when when the new
Okay.
book comes out.
Amazing,
I think
amazing.
I think you can get it cheap or free on Kindle. So have a look through on Kindle,
Okay,
and
yeah,
then steel
yeah.
yourself for the reissue.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds I mean, they both sound absolutely amazing. I love reading, so I will avidly consume both of them.
Fabulous.
Yeah, look forward to it. Well, Ian, it has been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you today, and thank you so much for all your wisdom and insights on storytelling and change and innovation and getting through COVID and everything really that we've talked about. It has been an absolute pleasure and a privilege to have you.
Oh, right back at you, Jane. It's been really fun. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Well, thank you, and thank you everybody for watching, and see you again soon.